Hi, and welcome to week 8, where we focus on the language learning strategy. During this week, we don't have any assigned readings or any application activities you're working on apart from the language learning strategy assignment. This week is designed to be a chance for you to begin to think about what you've been learning in this course so far and to choose a strategy that you've really found to be interesting or that you've identified with and to try it out in your own classroom. So you'll see for this week that the steps in the to-do list involve kind of walking you through the different components of this assignment. I've linked the strategy rubric and assignment description. So if you haven't already looked at that, please spend some time looking through exactly what I'm asking for in this assignment and how you'll be evaluated. And then you can see that I've given you kind of a step-by-step list of what to do for this assignment. So first, I want you to think about what language domain you want to focus on. We've talked about all of the domains at this point. So is it a strategy that's focused on reading, writing, speaking, or listening? So choose the one that you want to try out that connects to one of those domains. And then I want you to adapt that strategy for your particular bilingual or multilingual learners and create any materials that you'll need for that strategy. So I imagine some of the materials that you might create could be things like sentence frames. You might need some visuals that you're creating. You might need to design some sort of handout that goes along with the strategy. If you're focusing on oracy, maybe it's writing out the specific discussion talk moves, the discussion prompts that you might be using. If it's something around assigning specific roles, you might think about what those roles or those groups might be. So anything that you need to do to be able to put that strategy into practice with your own students within a given lesson. So you'll then record the lesson where you use that strategy and choose a 5-minute segment that shows just the strategy. It can be a full segment, or maybe it can be, it could also be kind of pieces of, if the strategy is implemented over the course of the lesson, maybe it would be a couple pieces that you put together, but approximately 5 minutes. So you'll upload that in the discussion forum to share with your discussion group, along with the any relevant instructional artifacts. So that might be the lesson plan where you wrote kind of the description of what you were going to do. It might be presentation slides that you create for the strategy, anchor charts, sentence frames. It might be samples of student work after they've engaged with whatever the strategy was. So I'm leaving that open, but you do need to include some sort of artifacts to show what you did for the strategy as part of this assignment. You'll then be writing a brief reflection, about 2 to 3 double-spaced pages, and I've given you some specific guiding questions where you're reflecting on kind of what you did and why, and anything you might do differently. And you'll see that there's the what you did section where you talk about the strategy and how you actually implemented it. The why did you do this section has 2 parts. So I want you to both explain why the strategy is beneficial for MLLs in general. And that's where I want you to connect to some theories and concepts we've read about, like comprehensible input, the interaction hypothesis, translanguaging, message abundancy, sociocultural theory. So give me the rationale for why this is a useful strategy. So we want to make that connection between research and practice, and theory and practice, really clear. So make sure you cite there, and then explain any specific adaptations you made as you were designing, as you were thinking about your students in particular. So there may have been things that you changed about the strategy in thinking about the students in your room. Then I'll have you reflect on the effect on students' learning and how you know. So share, what you think students took away from the lesson because of that strategy, and give any evidence of how you know that that's the case. So it could be that you looked at their work afterwards. You might have collected exit tickets at the end of the lesson, or perhaps you took some in the moment notes on how students were using language. So anything you can give that shows, what you know about student learning because of that strategy. And then finally, what would you do differently? That's where you identify anything that you might change about the strategy in the future to make it even more effective for MLLs. So based on what you've done, what might you do differently? I know there are a few of you in the classroom who may not be currently teaching MLLs, so you might be in a classroom, but you don't have multilingual students, multilingual learners in the room. And some of you might not be currently teaching at all. So I've given a few ways to differentiate for this assignment. You'll see that I also explain that in the assignment description. But if you look in this bright space page, I've tried to also give you some more details about what an alternative might look like or how you might differentiate this for your particular purpose. So you can see that if you don't have MLLs in the classroom, but you are teaching, you could see if there's another classroom with MLLs where you could teach a mini lesson with the strategy, or teach the strategy within your classroom, and be sure to include lots of strong language supports, even though the students in your classroom are not MLLs, and then talk about any additional things you might do differently if you were implementing that same strategy with multilingual learners. We know that a lot of the strategies we've learned about are good for all students because they really do help you think about language and language supports. So I imagine it would also still be useful for you to engage in that strategy with students who are not MLLs, but think about anything you might tweak and do differently if you had more multilingual learners in the room. For those of you who are not in a classroom at all, you also have two options. You can see if there is a teacher who's willing to let you teach a small strategy, teach a lesson or a component of a lesson using a strategy, even if it's just with a small group of MLLs. But if that's not possible at all, you can teach a mock lesson. So kind of record yourself teaching the lesson as if you were in a classroom of students. You can have perhaps some of your classmates act as students, or you can just pretend that they are in the room. Obviously, it's, better to be able to do this in a classroom, but if that's not possible, certainly this is a good alternative. So do go through the same exercise of designing the strategy, implementing it, and talking through what you might do differently if you were actually teaching this strategy with MLLs. So that is the focus for today, for this week. And like I mentioned, you don't have any other readings or viewing. So the goal is really to give you some space to focus on this, but also to have some time to focus on the other major assignments that we've been working on steadily throughout the course. So once you finish this, you submit that to me, the paper, which also includes any relevant instructional artifacts. And you can look at the rubric to see exactly how I'm going to be grading it. So make sure you have all those components. And then you'll be posting on the discussion board the video and a brief reflection of what you did. So what the strategy is, what you learned, and any areas where you'd like some feedback from your peers or questions you still have. You are welcome, if you write the paper first, you can draw from it for your reflection, but you can see that the paper has a slightly different focus and some different guiding questions than the reflection. So please don't just copy and paste the whole paper in, but you are welcome to use pieces of it if you've written the paper first before you do your post. And then you see at the very bottom of our to-do list, the PD project and advocacy problem paper. Again, I encourage you to carve out some time this week to make some progress on those if you haven't been able to yet. I've also created an optional check-in forum. If you do have questions or you just kind of want to share where you're at with either of those projects, you can post there. You can let me know if there's places you want some feedback, and I'm happy to jump in there and either schedule a time to meet with you or give you some feedback on or things that you're wondering about or respond to questions that you have about the projects. So that is it for this week. I look forward to seeing which strategies you choose and how you take them up, and seeing the ways that you're making sense of some of the different methods we've been learning about in the course. And I hope you have a great week.